So let's start. A little bit about me. So as you can see from the picture, I had quite a rough childhood in the south of Italy. I was basically a little gun runner, and with a minor, underage drinking problem, as the helmet here hints. I still wonder sometimes how they allow me to work at Amnesty International. But jokes aside, I'm an incurable language lover, something I think we have in common here. I was the kind of kid, or even teenager, who used to, identify, track and pursue foreign tourists in order to practice with them, my broken English and French. But it's not called stalking, just, to be sure. I'm lucky to have been able to follow my passion in my studies. So I hold a degree in translation from the University of Bologna and an MA in translation and interpreting from the University of Westminster in London. After graduation, I went on, with my career as a freelance translator, terminologist, and interpreter. But then at a certain point, I needed a new challenge. So I wanted to see how things were on the other side of the desk. So I went into, project manager first, then team management. And then I became assistant operations manager. And then in 2014, Amnesty International came into my life, and it was love at first sight, or more or less. And 2014, a very key date for Amnesty International, not because I was hired, unfortunately, but it could be. But we will see, why in a minute. I think, everyone, here knows a bit about Amnesty International, or I hope so. But I thought, I would share with you a little timeline of key dates for Amnesty, and I will explain also why these are important from a language perspective. Very beginning, 28th of May, 1961, the British lawyer Peter Benenson publishes the founding article of Amnesty International, The Forgotten Prisoners. Basically, he read about two students who had been imprisoned or sentenced to 7 years of imprisonment in Portugal, and he was really gutted, basically. So he wrote this article, and 2 years later, the International Secretariat of Amnesty International, so the headquarters, so to speak, was created. Just 1 year later, we were awarded the consultative status at the United Nations, then the Council of Europe and the UNESCO. And almost 10 years later, we were awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for our work against torture. So just a jump of a few years. In 2011, Amnesty turns, 50. So now we are a 59-year-old organization, a movement. And the key date of my, hiring, 2014, Amnesty realizes that in order to truly become, a global movement, it needed a change. And this change happened with a massive restructuring of Amnesty International. You can read it in many ways. It can be fortunate or unfortunate. But the purpose was to move closer to the ground where the human rights abuses were perpetrated. So from one headquarters in London, we created 17 headquarters around the world. So London wasn't and isn't anymore the headquarter, but we have 17 headquarters, as I was saying, called IS, International Secretariat Regional Offices. This is key, very key, so remember this date. Today, basically, we are a global movement of over 7 million people around the world who campaign, for human rights, in order that human rights are enjoyed by all. So what does this all have with language? Well, everything, really. Because from the very beginning, Amnesty recognized language as being a core asset. Actually, it acknowledged and recognized language as an instrumental tool to achieve a greater human rights impact worldwide. And this led to the creation of the language policy and strategy in 2007. And in particular, the language strategy was the movement's need for adequate tool for internal democracy of our organization and external, the achievement of an external human rights impact worldwide. Maybe the more visible outcome of the language policy and strategy was the creation of the Language Resource Center, the LRC, which is a virtual network of language experts operating from different locations worldwide and providing expert language support and guidance, strategic guidance to the movement. So I hope you can see it. I tried to put some red spots on the map here to show you how dispersed we are, really, within our team. And it's here, within the LRC, that the translation service sits. Just to give you an idea what we do or we have done, for example, in 2019, we translated over, almost 7 million words for more or less, which equals to 15,000 pages of documents. And when I say document, I mean 80 plus document formats and text types. So we translate all the sort of material you can imagine or see. So we translate research report, campaigning material, media material, apps, MOOCs, web platforms, anything really, letters to governments, etc. Everything to enable, the work of Amnesty International. We managed over 6,000 projects, and we translated into 53 languages, Arabic, English, Spanish, and French being the most strategic languages of Amnesty International. English still being the source, or more or less the source language, although with the opening of the regional offices, we saw a change in the trend, so English has become also a target language. And 49 other languages. These are mainly the local regional languages like Igbo, Hausa, Divehi. You can imagine the fun we have when we have to source. But was this, you might think, or maybe not, I don't know, this guy has got a cool job, wow. Well, was it really the cool job I had thought of when I joined Amnesty? More or less. So I thought of sharing with you some challenges and opportunities I had or encountered along the way. So after a massive restructuring of the International Secretariat, I have a question for you. What do you think we were left with, or we found, or we had to work with? Any volunteer? No? Silence? Well, more or less silence. Chaos. Really, chaos, enormous chaos. So there was a lot of inertia, a lot of lack of established processes. There were people, there were teams, key teams who had lost key, team members, so with them the knowledge. People who used to, colleagues who used to submit a translation request by default in all the core languages, although the report was, on China, and it had no sense to be translated into Arabic, for example. So a lack of understanding also of the best strategic use of the funds of the donors. So anyway, to make it short, this led to a great opportunity, which is the creation of the London-based planner position. Basically, the planner we decided to locate this position in London because it was still the headquarter in the sense of, the global teams were all there, the ones producing the content. This person was tasked with identifying potential, job submitters or open her ears and eyes to see if, she heard about a particular project which was developed or which was in the pipeline. And basically, she's self-invited to their project meetings. I mean, the planner and myself worked very well, I mean, very closely together. I used to manage this colleague, and we basically developed a strategy of, self-invitation, and we, little by little, we showed colleagues that we weren't just a language support function, but we actually could have a say in the projects, and we could contribute that language strategic aspect that they were lacking, actually. So if this was the situation, in London, an office with 50 years, of history, can you imagine what was the situation in the newly created regional offices? Well, just imagine that for 1 second and try not to scream. It was pure chaos, because basically there was new staff, no experience whatsoever with Amnesty, lack of processes altogether, best practices, no understanding of, even the language need they had. They had so many challenges already to build up their own team that we were basically, we were invisible to them. They didn't even think about us. So this led to another opportunity, which is basically the creation of regional language production coordinators. The coordinator posts. In other words, this was an army of planners deployed at regional level. When I say army, I'm a bit, exaggerating. There were 5 guys, basically 1 per region. But they were actually, and there are, our ears and eyes at regional level, and they were, adopting the same tactic of self-inviting to meetings. So the planner and myself worked a lot together on the training on of these colleagues, because the planner had to train them from a coordination, planning and coordination perspective, and myself from a translation best practice perspective. Basically this led to a lot of documentations, because these guys had to be independent. They had to be seen in the region as the experts in language and language support and language guidance, and they didn't have to come to us to ask questions all the time or confirmation, etc. But they really, needed to lead at regional level. But Amnesty is a changing environment all the time, so we hadn't enough with this, and Amnesty decided that we had to move away from the old-fashioned printed material and to move to digital. A rapid change in production landscape. This gave us big headaches, to be honest, because my team was not used at all to translating, web platforms or apps. We had no idea whatsoever. So, but still, we were expected, not only to provide the linguistic, support, but also the guidance I was talking about earlier. How would this play in, you know better than me, you are localization experts. It wasn't easy at all, but it led to another opportunity, which was the creation of the Global Digital Content Translation Coordinator. Basically, this person was tasked, and is tasked, with working with, on the one hand, with translation teams or language teams and digital experts of Amnesty International. So putting them together and making sure that this translates into an efficient, effective, workflow or processes and standards as well. In order for this person also to provide that guidance that we were asked of, we were expected of. So this leads me to the last challenge I thought of sharing with you, which is more of a personal and professional one. So, as I said earlier to you, the LSC is made up of dispersed people, basically, and this, made me think of the remote management. 75% of my reports are, remote. Based in other offices around the world. So I physically only sit with the Spanish translation team in Madrid, but I manage all the others. And sometimes these guys have also, matrix management, so 2 managers, who have to try not to drive them crazy. And another complication was the the silos. The translation team I manage, they used to be independent teams, actually entities, publishing houses of Amnesty International, which then, with the creation of the LRC, were put under the umbrella of the Language Resource Center. So they had nothing in common. Of course, yes, they translated, but they had never worked together or shared best practices. Everyone had their own, workflows. Everyone thought that their workflow was the best one. So, usual stuff. But this led to, an opportunity for me. I think, I realized that there was a lack of trust in general across the team, and the opportunity was, in particular, building a feedback culture. These guys had been working for Amnesty for 20 years. I was a very young manager, 30, aged 30, but I realized that actually they had never been asked to provide feedback to their managers, which, it was quite surprising, because they had a lot, to help me with as well. So I started, showing them that, I needed the feedback in order to then row in the same direction, understand their needs, etc. It has been quite a difficult thing to, to change, a mindset to change. But looking back now, I'm pretty, happy with the outcome, because there is, a bidirectional feedback culture. And when it comes to silos, I thought of putting in place, cross-team project, meetings, projects, sorry. So, for example, we had a global project in French, Spanish, and in Arabic. So I asked them to volunteer a team lead, and then I pushed them to work together and to come up with basically the requirements or the guidelines they had to share with the rest of the project team. So I only jumped in the conversation when they had something ready already. It's not because I was lazy, but it's because, this really put them together and push them to share best practices as well. And some of them also used to steal some ideas from the others and apply them to their way of working. So anyway, it was, I think, a success, because now we are more integrated, but the silos is not something that, you just fix once, and no, you have to keep working on that. And at the basis for me, it's, the trust building I was talking about. Trust, which, if you imagine, trust was important internally, but trust was also important, externally with other teams. And this was essential to gain also a seat at the table of strategic discussions. So I was saying, basically, earlier that we positioned ourselves as not only as a language support function. Of course, we do translation. Of course, we provide the language services. But by that kind of self-invitation to project meetings, we also demonstrated that we could, contribute more. We could let our, colleagues who were really English-oriented to understand that we had a say, and we were key stakeholders sitting with peers at the same table and rowing in the same direction, because we wanted to cheer for the same, goals or the same achievements, because they were also our achievements, and not only, the project team, and we were just translating. But at the basis of all of this, there is also something else that we realized along the way, and it's the importance of education and educating our colleagues, and not be afraid of re-educating. This is a fundamental part of our daily job, really. If you think of Amnesty, you can also imagine, the rotation of, people, not a lot, as you might think, but anyway, there are colleagues who come, go, etc. So you can't really think that, oh yeah, I delivered an induction, to you 1 year ago, so you should know what we can help you, with. It doesn't work like that. So the re-education, there is always actually every month we try to do a tour of our, the teams we work most with, and we also started this feedback culture with them, just to, also know what we can improve on. And this is then, very visible in the feedback they give to us. I mean, they're not just happy because we provide good quality translation, but also for the added value we bring to them. So translation is a key contributor to reaching their target. But when I say their target, I also mean our target. I mean, it can be, of course, a target audience, but to me, it's, the most meaningful target, which is the human rights impact. And, talking about impact, when I think about translation at Amnesty International in particular, you can think about challenges, you can think about figures that we saw earlier. But to me, translation at Amnesty is about human rights impact, or the contribution to the impact. I was saying earlier as well that, the language strategy in particular is the movement's tool. The movement's need, for adequate tool for internal democracy of Amnesty International. And you have to think that all our internal governance documents need to be accessible in 3 languages, English being the source, French and Spanish. So can you imagine a big organization like Amnesty International tackling key human rights issue only in English? I really don't think it's possible, because, no matter how Anglophonized we are. These are really, difficult issue to tackle really in a foreign language. So you need to have access to this type of documents in order to then take part in the Global Assembly meeting, which is the highest decision-making body of Amnesty International. And then we have the contribution to the impact, which comes through the translation of our external-facing communication. First, and foremost, our corporate website, which is mostly translated. English is the source, but all the 3 other languages are translation, and we also take care of the uploading and the management of the other language pages. And then other material like urgent actions, reports, and the contribution which comes via the media. So the translation of media material, and this is a very recent example I'm very proud of, because it was the full Chinese translation we did, which was actually used by the Hong Kong media, Hong Kong media for the covering of, for their coverage of the Hong Kong reckless policing. So this to me is actually, human rights impact, or contribution to the human rights impact. But there is more tangible impact, and it's not me speaking this time. This is a testimony of a researcher in the South Africa regional office. This person says, the translated report and executive summaries in Siswati made a massive impact on the affected families and local communities in Swaziland, as well sending a strong message to the Eswatini authorities that Amnesty International material is accessible to all, not only to those who speak English. So, to sum up, to me, translation at Amnesty International is about inclusion, accessibility, and human rights impact. Thank you very much.